Welcome to Political Perspectives. I'm Hugo Gurdon, Editor-in-Chief of The Washington Examiner. I'm joined by Byron York, who is Chief Political Correspondent of The Washington Examiner. If you're joining us by YouTube, please remember to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. So, Byron, this is a big week in politics, as it seems every week is, but let's start with perhaps the biggest thing, and that is that the federal government is now shut down. What I want to get to before we get to the substance of this deal, or rather this lack of a deal, is the politics of it. Who is going to, in the past, the GOP has generally come out worse from these things. The public has disapproved of the way that the GOP has behaved. Last time it didn't work out that way and the Democrats got the blame. How do you see this one panning out?
Well, you're right that Republicans have often taken the blame for these things. First of all, you can forgive any listeners, viewers, readers, if they're bored with all this, because they've seen all this before. You have a shutdown, and it never really amounts to much of anything. But here we are. This is what I think is going to happen, rather than Republicans being blamed or Democrats being blamed. Shutdowns usually work out this way. There's one party that says our issue is so important that we will not allow the government to go on until we deal with it. And then there's the other party that says, no, let's just keep the government running, and then we can deal with your issue. And that's the side that the public always goes with.
Right.
The side that attaches conditions to keeping the government open is the one that gets the blame. I think that's the way it is. In this case, it is Democrats. Right. So we can test this theory, but I think that's what's happening.
Well, yeah, I think that that's right. I think that they are the ones who are insisting, and we will get to the substance of their demands in a minute. But to stay with blame and the politics of it, the reason it seems to me, at least, that we're having this at all is that Chuck Schumer, who is the minority leader, the Senate leader, the Democrat leader in the Senate, went along with the GOP, with the Republicans, about 6 months ago, and he got all hell for it from his own party. The base was outraged. They wanted him to fight. He was seen to capitulate. There was a lot of talk, even by elected members of Congress, that he should no longer be the leader, and he is still, in polling, the least liked and approved of member of Congress. So he's determined not to be ousted. And so it seems to me that one of the reasons we're getting this, even though he knows that the government should not be shut down, he's willing, has been willing to let it shut down because he doesn't want to be seen to be weak. And this actually reveals one of the weaknesses of the Democratic Party. It doesn't know what it is at the moment. The leaders don't know how to behave or lead their base. They're weak. They look at their base, they say, that's where the base is going, I better go with them.
Well, Republicans are calling this the Schumer shutdown, which does kind of roll off the tongue. So they're going to be saying it a lot. And this theory that you just talked about, that Schumer's doing this because he just caught so much grief from the progressive wing of this party. Vice President JD Vance just went into that in some detail in the White House briefing room.
Chuck Schumer is terrified she's going to get a primary challenge from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
And that's why he's being, quote, tough on Republicans on this issue.
Right. It seems very clear that that's what's going on here.
Yeah.
And so let's turn to the substance. The principal demand that Democrats are making, for which, if they don't get it, they are willing to shut down the government, is that the subsidies on Obamacare premiums, which are due to expire at the end of the year, should be perpetuated or at least extended. And it needs to be remembered by our viewers that these subsidies were put in place only during the COVID years, or when COVID was at its peak, and it was because of the economic hit that people were taking. They were, like so many things, put in place temporarily, and there was a good reason for it being temporary because COVID wasn't going to last forever. Now, at a cost of $400 billion, the Democrats want to extend these, $400 billion over the next 10 years. Plus, there's another $300 billion, which is sort of to undo various other things which were in the big, beautiful bill that was just passed. So this is essentially saying we want to shut down the government, you Republicans, unless you extend what we said was temporary when we put them in place something like 5 years ago, and you undo a key part of the legislation that you passed just recently and which was signed into law. No one's going to think this is very reasonable, will they?
Well, I don't think so. Here is my grand theory about this. The greatest Democratic policy achievement of this century so far is Obamacare. If you go back to when Obamacare was passed, obviously there was a huge fight, and Democrats passed a smaller version of Obamacare than they would have wanted, but it was all they could get through. In fact, there were some Democrats at the time who referred to what they passed as a starter home that
Right.
they would build on in the future. Now, and they knew a lot of it was the funding of it, a lot of it was inadequate, but they would fix that in the future, get this thing in place and fix it in the future. Now, the next time that the Democrats control the House, the Senate, and the White House is when Joe Biden comes in. And the top Democratic priority is expanding Obamacare. And these COVID subsidies that you talk about were included in the American Rescue Act, which was the big COVID bill passed by Joe Biden immediately upon taking the presidency. And that's they expand these subsidies enormously, only for a year because it's just a temporary crisis. We're not doing this permanently. Well, then that year goes by, and then in the Inflation Reduction Act, they pass them again, even larger, and they pass them to stay in place until the end of 2025, which would be this December 31st. So now they're saying you must make them permanent, or you must expand them and extend them for some specified period of time.
Right.
And Republicans are saying what you said, which was that was an emergency. The emergency's over. Now we can reduce them. Well, you have to go back to that original plan, the starter home. They're building, they're keeping building. So each time that they raise the subsidy level, that becomes the new base. They're not going
Right.
to go back. They got to go higher.
So while Democrats want to build and they want to expand what the government's spending, we have an administration here, and more specifically, head of the Office of Management and Budget, Russell Vogt, who is determined to cut government bloat. And in this respect, I wanted to ask you whether I'm right in thinking that the shutdown is something of a gift for him, because when the government is shut down, he doesn't have to furlough government workers, he can fire them. And that means that he can go in and slash government spending on government employees faster than he might otherwise have done. So there is, and this also produces a big tension in the Democratic Party, because there are Democrats who simply want to fight and oppose, but there are other Democrats who just hate the idea of damage being done and numbers being reduced in the federal bureaucracy. And there were votes on Tuesday night, just before the shutdown, and John Thune in the Senate managed to peel off a very small number of Democrats. I think he got to 55 votes.
Yeah.
Perhaps he's thinking the Democrats are split on this. Perhaps this is a gift. They will see this as a gift to Russell Vogt and the budget slashes in the administration. There will be more and more Democrats willing, as perhaps not very many days or perhaps weeks pass, who will flip. Is this, do you think, playing into the hands of Russell Vogt? And do you see this as becoming increasingly a problem that Democrats will not want to let him continue?
Yes and yes. The White House, just as recently as right before we were recording this, has been saying these layoffs could come as soon as a couple of days from now,
Right.
creating enormous time pressure on Democrats. And there are only 5 more that are needed, creating enormous time pressure on Democrats to do something here. And believe me, if they don't do anything, and Russell Vought does engineer the layoff, the permanent layoff of federal employees because of this, the Democrats are going to have a huge, acrimonious finger pointing session afterwards. But this is kind of it's kind of like Elon Musk's dream that the Democrats have created this situation in which bureaucratically it is possible to do something that is reduce the size of the government workforce without having to really even ask for it, because the Democrats just gave it to you.
Right.
So it's a huge thing, and my guess is the Democrats will cave before that happens.
Right, right. So that could be pretty quick. Yeah, as you say, JD Vance actually just today said that he didn't think this was going to last for very long. It's not going to be a long one.
And I'll tell Hakeem Jeffries right now, I make this solemn promise to you that if you help us reopen the government, the sombrero memes will stop. And I've talked to the President of the United States about that.
But let's switch away from the shutdown to another enormous news this week, and that is the announcement by President Trump and the Israeli Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu of a deal to end the war in Gaza and to do various other things relating to settling the situation there. And although President Trump did a few things, like, for example, obliging Bibi Netanyahu to apologize to Qatar for the attack there, a recent attack there, and to rule out the annexation of Judea and Samaria. So he made it look like he was doing some tough things with the Israelis. He has actually managed a kind of diplomatic coup, it seems to me, in that Arab countries are lining up to agree and approve this peace plan. And what he's managed to do is isolate Hamas.
If accepted by Hamas, this proposal calls for the release of all remaining hostages immediately, but in no case more than 72 hours.
Everybody now seems to recognize that this can work only if Hamas, which is obviously a designated terrorist group, lays down its arms and gives back gives the hostages back. And if it doesn't do that, President Trump has said he's absolutely going to back Israel if it goes in and annihilates Hamas. So this is quite an achievement already, is it not, for President Trump?
I think so. Look, everything depends on those Arab nations you're talking about, because if they don't go along with it, and they allow Hamas basically to reject this deal, then it's just everything is just much more difficult for the United States.
Right.
Netanyahu made it very clear at the White House, saying, "Look, Hamas, you can do this the easy way, or you can do it the hard way. In other words, you can take this deal, or we'll kill you."
Mm-hmm.
So that's the deal here. And as a matter of fact, as I watched this, I thought to myself, there's not much in it for Hamas here,
Right.
Because the deal seems to put in place Netanyahu's war aims.
I support your plan to end the war in Gaza, which achieves our war aims. It will bring back to Israel all our hostages, dismantle Hamas's military capabilities, end its political rule, and ensure that Gaza never again poses a threat to Israel.
Which are to get the hostages back, living and dead, and to dismantle and destroy Hamas as a military or governing entity, and then make sure that Israel is never threatened by Gaza again.
Right.
He gets all of that in this. Now, Israel does give up prisoners, but I believe they were always prepared to give up a large number of prisoners in exchange for the hostages. So I think to myself, well, what's in it for Hamas? Well, probably not being killed immediately. That's
Right.
what's in it for Hamas, and it's a bad deal if you're in Hamas. And so then you look to the Arab nations. You look to fellow Muslims in the Middle East, say, I need some support here. And they say, no. Well, Hamas is in a very, very bad situation. And hopefully that's the way it's going to turn out.
Yeah, and I think that it means that I think that Hamas is actually more likely to reject it. I think that some of them, fairly senior, have already said that they are unwilling to hand over their arms until they have a
Yeah.
Palestinian state. So this isolation of the terrorists, isolated from other Arab nations, as you say, the key Arab nations, is
Yeah.
the big deal. No doubt that there will still be all sorts of malicious and useful idiots in the West who want to support the terrorists, but it's almost like a sort of refresh where the finger of blame can be pointed at Hamas, and Israel gets support from the United States for an assault that will finally remove them from Gaza. Anyway, that's where we will leave it. I want to thank our viewers for joining us today and ask them to join again next week. Byron, thank you very much for joining me, and we'll be back in a week's time with Political Perspectives.